Welcome to the Insight Meditation community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
And you may have noticed on the website that the topic of tonight's talk is forgiveness. And that's a topic that can bring up some tough stuff. It might have you reflecting on some of the resentments you carry. So I want to ask you to please take care to be aware of how this is landing with you. We want to be able to take care of yourself. When we do the reflections, you might want to choose to bring to mind something small, not just somebody who cut you off in traffic, rather than an experience that might be more difficult for you. And just being aware of how you feel supported, and to know that at any point you can choose to step back or step away if you're not feeling up to that tonight. And that's just fine. So just wanted to give you a heads up. And also wanted to mention I was away last week, so I didn't get an opportunity to hear Sharon's talk until last night when I played it. And I realized that I'll be touching on a couple of the topics that she touched on. And I was very pleased to continue to listen and find out we weren't saying the same thing. But only that you might hear some echoes of references to loving kindness meditation, or Metta, and some references to some of the issues around boundaries. So she laid the foundation, and hopefully what I say will just complement or build upon that foundation. All right, so sometimes when I'm doing loving kindness meditation or metta meditation, I can get stuck. I'm very happy to send love and kindness to myself and to my loved ones and my community. But then when the directions turn to now bring to mind the difficult one, sometimes I feel inside I'm going, put on the brakes. It's just fine to send loving kindness to, family, the whole world, the stranger I've never met. But ask me to send love and kindness to someone who may have harmed me, that can be really difficult. So some things can just be hard to let go, because we've all been harmed in our lifetime, and the degree of harm may differ. But we've been hurt, or others we love may have been hurt by greed or violence or betrayal, and we've seen the suffering that it causes. And some of the heaviest baggage we carry is carrying around these resentments we hold. But if we truly want to free our hearts and free our minds from this suffering, we may choose to let go. We may choose forgiveness. So when I'm talking about forgiveness, the definitions say things like to cease to feel resentment on account of a wrong committed, to give up claim to requital or retribution. And then others note that forgiveness is an act freely chosen by the forgiver. It's not a requirement or a demand. So what I'm talking about here is the choice before us to forgive ourselves, to forgive others when we've been harmed, rather than clinging and harboring a lasting resentment. So the psychologist Robert Enright identified 4 steps to forgiveness that I thought were pretty interesting. The first is to uncover your anger. What's underneath this? Why am I carrying this? The second is to decide to forgive. Just open the door to possibility. You don't have to do it yet. The third is to work on forgiveness. Maybe recognizing that we're all human, I make mistakes. You make mistakes. And the fourth is to release yourself from the emotional prison. Notice you're not alone in your suffering. These experiences are why you are the person you are. And self-forgiveness is essential. So four interesting steps. But I also want to be clear about what forgiveness is not. I'm not suggesting that people should be allowed to harm or hurt, to commit violence or abuse without consequences. And forgiveness does not mean forgiving and forgetting or condoning bad behavior or giving up the boundaries we need to be safe. We don't have to have idiot compassion and fail to protect ourselves. For years, clergy inappropriately counseled victims of domestic violence to turn the other cheek. And that left generations of people, often women and their children, to live in fear and danger. And in fact, forgiveness is impossible until we're relatively safe. We're no longer in crisis. We have to know there's a spark of sacredness in each of us, and we need to be treated as sacred. And then forgiveness in the context of systemic oppression can be really complicated. And given the widespread harm that's caused by oppression, it's beyond me to forgive on behalf of others who are harmed. And until there's some kind of accounting for the harm that's been done through some kind of truth and reconciliation or reparations, perhaps forgiveness is premature. So, for these and many other reasons, systemic oppression is beyond the scope of this talk. Now, some argue that forgiveness is not a Buddhist concept at all. In Christianity, there's a long tradition of asking God for forgiveness for our trespasses. But in the Buddhist tradition, we don't have a similar construct. We don't pray to God, and we're all responsible for our own actions and our own karma. But in the Dhammapada, the central Buddhist teachings attributed to the Buddha, it says, he abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred is not appeased. Hatreds never cease through hatred in this world. Through love alone they cease. This is an eternal law. So we're called upon to turn to love and not to turn anyone out of our hearts. But when others hurt us, particularly when they hurt us deeply, clinging to resentment can be its own form of suffering. Now, I was thinking about the fact that our Buddhist practices are based on the willingness to see things as they are and to rid ourselves of the three poisons of hatred, greed, and delusion, all of which may be at play when we hold tightly to resentment. There might be greed in the grasping and clinging to the idea that I am right and the other is wrong. Then there's the aversion when we hold on to our anger and are determined to stay separate from another. And then there's the delusion, the misunderstanding that by withholding forgiveness, we'll somehow right the wrong. If we think about it, what does it really mean if we refuse to forgive someone? Let's try to look clearly at some of those thoughts that are present when we harbor resentment. And notice any of these roots of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion at work. So I'm going to ask you to join me in a reflection. You're welcome to close your eyes or move your gaze downward. And I'll talk you through a reflection, and at the end I'll ring the bell to let you know it's over. So I ask you to bring to mind someone whom it's hard to forgive. And let's stick with a fairly minor infraction. Maybe someone who's wronged you in a more everyday fashion. disagreed on an important social issue, or treated you unfairly at work or in a relationship. Bringing to mind someone who has harmed you. And what do we think will happen if we don't forgive them? Will the other person suffer? Do we want them to? Will I get revenge? Will I show that I'm a better person? If I don't forgive, do I think that I'll get justice or fairness? Or show them that I won't allow them to continue to act this way? Do I think that hate will heal my pain or the pain of others? Do I think that I can make them understand just how deeply they've hurt or harmed me? That they'll regret it? I have to ask, am I changing the other? So what is our intention in holding on to this resentment? It bears reflection. And is this belief true? Are these thoughts working? And thank you for taking time for that reflection. Perhaps it is delusion to believe that withholding our forgiveness is right, or wholesome, or productive. Because the person most affected by my holding on to resentments tends to be me. And looking at the resentments that tend to haunt us, we can harbor memories of some of the really most painful experiences in our lives, and then return to them again and again because we're holding on to them. The things that we struggle to let go are sometimes traumatic for us or for those we love. Whether it's a betrayal or a deep harm, a death, something that left our life altered in some way. It used to be like this, and now it's like that. And it'll never be the same. And perhaps this story of loss or betrayal becomes part of the story of our life. We may hesitate to let go because it may be our link to that person, or the story of ourselves, or the reason we are the way we are. If we forgive, will it erase all that? So withholding forgiveness can be a futile attempt to frame the story and preserve it in the way we wish. But no matter how hard we try, holding on tightly and clinging to our story won't change the past, and it won't fix it. At some point, we have to face the fact that, as Jack Kornfield says, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. It isn't going to change. So we realize that no longer is it the perpetrator of the harm who's keeping me from moving on, that maybe we're the ones who are clinging and refusing to let go and keeping the focus on that memory. There's this Tibetan story of two monks who were released from prison and where they had been tortured by their captors. And you might know this one. And the first one says, have you forgiven them? And the second says, I will never forgive them, never. And the first one replies, well, I guess they still have you in prison, don't they? Forgiveness allows us to unhook from that view of ourselves as a victim, defined by what happened to us or our loved ones. And we can turn that energy from maybe grief or regret that we associate with that and turn that to some of the more wholesome parts of our lives. The question really isn't what do you want to forgive, but what do I want to stop holding on to so tightly and clinging to? Forgiveness can be the gift that we give ourselves of freeing ourselves from being tied to this harm. We forgive for our own good, so that our life isn't spent looking backward at what went wrong. Instead of focusing on those who harmed us, we can shift our focus to the more wholesome parts of our lives, those we love, including ourselves. And we can allow this important experience to be in the past rather than defining our future. So the gift of these teachings is that if we are willing to stop clinging, our wounds and our hurts can dissolve and wash away. And mindfulness allows us to see that we can choose to make room in our hearts and our minds, both for the resentments and hard things, as well as the joy that can be present. Compassion practices teach us to care for ourselves as we let go. And self-compassion teaches us that before we can forgive others, we have to bring kindness to the wounded places in ourselves. And forgiveness doesn't just happen like flipping a switch. Jack Kornfield says, for great injustice, coming to forgiveness may include a long process of grief, outrage, sadness, loss, and pain. True forgiveness does not paper over what happened in a superficial way. It's not a misguided effort to suppress or ignore our pain. It cannot be hurried. It's a deep process, repeated over and over in our heart, which honors the grief and betrayal, and in its own time, ripens into the freedom to truly forgive. So it's a process, and we each have to feel our own edges around it and know when we are ready to acknowledge the harm and choose to have a different relationship with it. Many of you may have heard Eric Kolvig's work, which was first introduced to me as the forgiveness prayer. And these phrases, which I'll share, are lovely. And if you've heard it before, I imagine you want to hear it again. They recognize that forgiveness is a process that emerges over time. And he also recognizes that it involves recognizing that we're all human and we all make mistakes. So as humans, we need to include in ourselves in forgiveness. And we may also have compassion for the frailty and the humanity that leads others to do harm. And there is a link to these phrases and the resources for this talk. So again, I'm going to ask you to do a reflection with me. You may want to close your eyes or gaze downward. Again, I will ring a bell when we're done. I'm going to share with you Eric Kolvig's forgiveness prayer. Bringing to mind a time when you may have harmed yourself or another, perhaps in a minor way. As far as you're able to do so, extend forgiveness to yourself for this harming by saying these phrases to yourself. I allow myself to be imperfect. I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to be a learner, still learning life's lessons. I forgive myself. If I cannot forgive myself now, May I forgive myself sometime in the future. Just pausing to take that in. Now thinking of ways in which others may have harmed you. Again, beginning with minor harms. And as far as you're able to do so, extend forgiveness to them. Just as I allow myself to be imperfect, so I allow you to be imperfect. I allow you also to make mistakes. I allow you to be a learner, still learning life's lessons. I forgive you. If I cannot forgive you now, may I forgive you sometime in the future. Just sitting with this intention to forgive. It's a very tender place. So just take a moment to acknowledge what's present, whether that may be a bit of an opening or release, or perhaps the sadness that comes with this memory. If you wish, placing a hand on the heart. Thank you again for taking a minute to step away and to look internally. I want to acknowledge that for some people, forgiveness isn't a matter of yes or no or not yet. I mean, some people may feel that some experiences are just unforgivable. Experiences of trauma or abandonment or violence. They may feel too significant to let go right now. Philip Moffat talks about forgiving the unforgivable. What do we do then? He says, when a life is lost or great physical or mental damage done, there's no going back. There's only going forward. If you hold on to a personal claim because of what you lost, you assume the identity of the victim. It may seem right and proper, but oftentimes it's just another form of self-imprisonment. Forgiveness is about liberating your own feelings and finding meaning in life's worst events. It's about how you hold your heart in a terrible wrong while you act in the world to correct that wrong and try to prevent it from happening again. So in the face of such violations, the first step is to ensure safety, to take steps that it's never repeated. And then begins the serious work of loosening the grip that these experiences have on our emotions. Will you continue to carry it or set it down? It's heavy baggage. So I have to ask, what do we do when forgiveness isn't accessible to us? When it's not an option, when it feels too big, or when we're not ready? Then what? Because sometimes that's where we are. I think back on many years ago, my relationship with my first husband. He was abusive, and there was a lot of harm done. But I came to the point, years later, my life was going well, and I really found that I was able to forgive him, to understand that hurt people, and he'd been deeply harmed as a child. And I was able to forgive his unskillful behavior and let go of that resentment. And yet, what I was unable to let go of was my anger and resentment and sadness over the harm that he had done to our children and the ongoing effects that that would have on their health and their happiness. it can get really complicated when we're forgiving on behalf of another. And when we're stuck in a place where forgiveness may not be available, what can we do? Again, we might seek to understand what's there, what's behind the resentment, what's holding me back, and really dig in. We might investigate if we let go of the anger or the harm, what would we have to deal with? Would there be grief or sadness? We need to offer ourselves compassion for what may have been lost, for what may have changed, for the sadness we feel. And sometimes we need self-forgiveness, because we certainly can't forgive others until we forgive ourselves. So if we look into our heart of hearts and forgiveness is not available to us, what do the practices have to offer us in this difficult space? Well, as often is the case, the answer is turning to the heart practices of metta, compassion, equanimity, so that we can access joy. When forgiveness is not available, we might just seek equanimity, to be with what is, allowing the space in our heart to grow, to allow for the troubles that exist as well as what brings us joy. Equanimity can be that sense of spaciousness that allows our world to hold all of that, the sense of joy along with compassion for the suffering that people have experienced. Because when we're focused on our troubles, we can get a feeling of constriction, tightness, hyper-focus on a problem. And with greater equanimity, we can open our awareness to include a broader field of vision, more balance. I was struck by an example of equanimity last week. I was camping at the Outer Banks, and we checked into the campground. Ranger said, "Watch out, that ocean's really angry." And then when I arrived down at the dunes, I saw what she was talking about, because the ocean was angry. It was choppy and gray and turbulent and unwelcoming. And then as I sat in the dunes, I looked down the shore and saw that down there, the sun had peeked out, the water was turning blue, it had calmed down, and I was reminded that the ocean is not a gray, choppy, angry wave. The ocean is vast and deep. Underneath the choppy surface, there's stillness and calm. Equanimity is the ocean. It reminds us that balancing our perspective, allowing our awareness to be open and spacious enough, keeps us from narrowing our focus, contracting and clinging. Accepting what is, all of it. So if forgiveness is not available to you, can you find refuge in equanimity, in being able to be with it? When we're feeling anger and resentment, the teachings tell us that loving kindness, metta, and love are the antidotes. And I'll be using loving kindness and metta interchangeably here. And as I mentioned, sometimes wishing metta to specific objects like loved ones or neutral ones, difficult people, can be difficult. But Bhikkhu Analayo, monk and researcher, studied the early translations of the Metta Sutta and noted that in the early teachings, they don't really mention sending metta to specific individuals or objects. And instead, the guidance is to radiate love and compassion, kindness and joy in all directions. Front, right, back, left, above, and below. It reads, with your mind imbued with metta, dwell having pervaded in one direction and in the same way the second, the third, and the fourth direction, above and below, completely and everywhere. Being without mental shackles, resentment, ill will, or contention, with a mind imbued with metta that is supremely vast and great, boundless and well cultivated, dwell pervading the entire world. So when we want to move our focus away from those who have harmed us, and instead focus on the peace and ease available to us in the present moment, I've found that practicing metta in this traditional way that Bhikkhu Analayo teaches can be very helpful in opening my heart to just radiating love without having to focus on that difficult person. So just radiating metta to all beings without needing to focus on any individual, without expecting outcomes, without expecting change or forgiveness. Radiating loving kindness to all, without exception, can free us from focusing in the rearview mirror and help us to be present to access joy and love in the present moment and radiate that in all directions. So in our meditation, we'll revisit Eric Kolvig's forgiveness prayer and practice loving kindness meditation in that traditional style of the Metta Sutta. All right. Well, I know it's late in the evening and we're going to begin a guided meditation. So probably a good time to do a little stretch. Get the blood flowing a little bit before we settle in and find a comfortable space. And I'm going to begin by inviting you to do something with me. It just might be a nice soothing thing to do given the topic tonight. Kara Jewel Lingo, the wonderful teacher who is visiting and taught with us a few weeks ago, did a training for the Ecosattva course that Liz is coordinating. And she did a wonderful little sitting sequence that is around just letting the body know that everything is safe and secure, sort of a somatic healing. So I'm just going to begin with that and invite you to use it maybe later tonight when we're done. And all you have to do is to begin with, we're going to begin with just doing a little massage on the ears. The top of the ears, around the edges, that soft tissue in the ears, down to the earlobes. And the idea is that we're sending a soothing message to our body that everything's safe. Because the first place in our fight and flight response that we look for danger is in the ears. And this slow and gentle touching sends our body the message that we can relax. In the next place, just warm your palms a little bit and then put those warm palms over your eyes, resting for a moment in peace and quiet, and sending that message to our bodies that we're safe because the body looks after the ears. We use the eyes to search for danger. And this sends a message to our body that everything's quiet and safe. And then take those warm palms and hold them on your cheeks. Maybe in the fashion of that you would hold the face of a small child or a puppy. Letting our nervous system know things are calm and safe. And taking those palms down to our heart. And finally down an inch or two below our belly button and our belly. And hold the undefended and soft belly. Maybe release the breath. A deep inhale. Deep exhale. And open the mouth and out the breath. And in this relaxed way, we'll begin our meditation. Just landing in a calm, seated posture that allows us to turn our attention inward. After listening to all these words and allowing ourselves to feel present in our bodies and touch in with our hearts. Making what Noliwe Alexander calls the long, arduous 12-inch journey from the head to the heart. And scanning the body for any places where you might be holding tension. And just relax and release those areas. Perhaps the eyes, the neck, the shoulders, relaxing the spine, letting it be more fluid. Nice soft belly. Taking a few deep breaths. And noticing any sense of ease flowing down through the body. And sensing into your heart, just noticing and appreciating the goodness of your own heart. Your intention for being here in practice. Noticing the warmth and care and compassion that you bring to your practice. Allowing gentle support, kindness to flow through the body on each breath. Touching right where you need it most in your body. And as you breathe, calling forth the image of a place or a person that made you feel safe, nurtured, where you experienced love or care. Can you visualize those who have loved and cared for you? Their kind voices, imagining them around you, sitting around a table, or perhaps just a place where you felt happy and safe, even for a while. We're allowing ourselves to remember how it feels to feel safe and connected, and to remember that we carry these memories. And we always can carry this place of love as a refuge. Now we'll revisit the phrases in the forgiveness prayer, bringing your attention to the heart center in the middle of your chest, behind the breastbone, and breathing through the heart center. Try to say the words of this forgiveness meditation through your heart. Thinking of ways in which you have harmed yourself or harmed others, beginning with more minor things, not big acts of harming. As far as you're able to do so, extend forgiveness to yourself for this harming by saying these phrases to yourself. I allow myself to be imperfect. I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to be a learner still learning life's lessons. I forgive myself. If I cannot forgive myself now, may I forgive myself sometime in the future. And again, thinking of ways in which others may have harmed you, beginning with more minor harms. As far as you're able to do so, you can extend forgiveness to them. Just as I allow myself to be imperfect, so I allow you to be imperfect. I allow you also to make mistakes. I allow you to be learners still learning life's lessons. I forgive you. And if I cannot forgive you now, may I forgive you sometime in the future. Letting go of the burden. Just sitting with the experience of that in your heart. And notice and sit with whatever is there and offer space in the silence for it. Now tapping into that place of refuge, the support of loved ones and our own kind hearts, stoking the fires of kindness and care, we can arouse this quality of loving kindness, of metta, by using whatever tool works for us. That may be by calling on the circle of loved ones in our lives who support us, a beloved pet, or a phrase such as, "May all beings be well." Arousing an attitude of well-being for everyone, being a friend to everyone. Generating this sense of friendliness, of kindness, of metta in our hearts. May all beings be well. May I feel the love of being with my loved ones. Perhaps a warm feeling of softness over the heart center. Moving into an embodied feeling of metta, that loving kindness. With our whole body and mind filled with metta. Moving from doing metta to being metta. Just abiding in this beautiful sense of friendliness, goodwill, benevolence. We can just rest in it just as it is, no need to make it stronger. It can be intense or soft. With practice, this inner light will shine with increasing strength. Just relaxing into it. And now we'll move to radiating this loving kindness in all directions. In a very relaxed way, allowing the metta that wells up from our hearts to radiate in the different directions. We might picture a lit candle surrounded by curtains. And that loving kindness is the light. And we just softly and gently withdraw the curtains so that the light can radiate out in the front direction. Radiate out as far as the farthest star. Radiating loving kindness to the front. And then continuing to the right, gently pulling back the curtain so that loving kindness can radiate to the right. Continuing on to the back. radiating to the left side, not excluding anyone. Boundless, unlimited, loving kindness, radiating above and below. In all directions, without exception. And we can use the breath in support of this whole body awareness. Using the natural rhythm of the breath. On the in-breath is paying just a little more attention to the quality of the loving kindness. And on the out-breath, noting the boundlessness, spaciousness of the mind. Our whole body and mind filled with metta, being metta. And we'll keep practicing this way in silence. And the mind may wander as the mind does. We can just smile and notice and gently come back to your loving kindness practice. Radiating the light of loving kindness in all directions. Now bringing your attention back internally, just noting any feelings of light or peace or equanimity in your own heart. Noting any benefits of the practice. And in just a moment, I'll ring the bell to signal the end of our meditation. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be happy.